Greetings and welcome to another impressions video here at Words About Games, and today we're going to be looking at Veritas. Veritas is a first-person puzzle adventure game reminiscent of 90s point-and-click adventure games. You take on the role of someone waking up in a strange underground facility after having volunteered to take part in an experiment at Veritas Industries. With no memory of what happened to you the previous day and the facility seemingly completely empty, you need to explore and solve puzzles to piece together the mystery of what's going on and escape. Veritas feels very much like a throwback. I mentioned 90s point-and-click adventure games, and that's exactly the feeling that Glitch Games nails here. For anyone that didn't experience those games, the closest analogue I could think of would be an escape room. You explore the Veritas Industries facility in first person, transitioning between screens that usually... And that's fine, because the second I started playing Veritas and was tasked with escaping my room by solving a maze puzzle, a weird handle, some arrows hung on the wall, a screwdriver, and an oil drum, I knew what I was getting myself into. The game asks you to combine items or solve puzzles using logic that totally works within the game world itself, but wouldn't be something that you'd even think of doing in your real life. Like banging a drum in the correct sequence, spoiler alert, as laid out by some food you found in the diner earlier. That's the only puzzle solution I'll spoil in this video, don't worry. I actually quite like the puzzles I've encountered in Veritas, for the most part. Thinking that far outside the box is a muscle I haven't flexed in a long while, and these types of games were, at one point, inescapable. But I felt like most of the puzzles here were pretty fair. Some of them require some pretty epic leaps of logic, but I think the game does a good job of cluing you into how you should be approaching solving them. It's always satisfying when the dominoes start falling, as you solved one puzzle, which granted you an item to help you solve another you'd encountered earlier. I also really like the way the different levels have been designed. Each chapter of the game takes place in one large area, filled with multiple rooms and puzzles. As you solve the puzzles and progress on to the next chapter, you'll still need to backtrack occasionally to solve some puzzles you missed with new items acquired in the new area, such as using a flashlight you find in Chapter 3 to illuminate a passageway you can't cross in Chapter 2. It's good, enjoyable level design that makes Veritas feel less like a series of escape rooms and more like a proper location that gets more intricately interconnected as you move through it. With that being said, I've hit a wall with the game that I just can't get past. It unfortunately has nothing to do with the difficulty of the puzzles. There's a very robust hint system that guarantees that you can never actually get stuck if you decide you want to use it. Unfortunately, there are a few gameplay quirks that make Veritas a frustrating game to actually play. Some of which are bugs, some of which are gameplay features, and some of which I can't actually tell if they're bugs or gameplay features. My main frustration, and the reason I just can't play anymore, comes from a severely annoying control quirk. I've put a specific bit of footage over the top of this paragraph, and I need to explain what's happening. I'm attempting to input a code I wrote down into a box to unlock it. However, in Veritas, if you click the mouse button too many times, for some reason, you back out of whatever you're doing. You might have noticed this in other footage throughout the video. It happens so frequently, I imagine I caught it multiple times. Not only is this annoying on its own, but every time you're booted out of whatever you're trying to do, your progress is reset, meaning there are dozens of puzzles where I've had to repeatedly input solutions, but make sure I'm clicking slowly enough to not get sent flying out of the task. And if I click more than once, I'm suddenly ported to a different area of the game. This also spreads to simply moving through a level. Click on a door or a passageway too quickly after the screen loads, and instead of going where you intended to go, you'll go backwards instead. After almost 3 hours of this, I just can't deal with it anymore. There are other, smaller issues at play in the game. Veritas gives you a camera that lets you take pictures of clues, puzzle solutions, anything you like really, and even lets you pull those photos out and have them on screen for reference as you travel or solve puzzles. The trouble is, the photos are huge and generally obscure whatever you're trying to interact with, making them kind of pointless in the face of simply writing stuff down on paper, or in my case, post-it notes. There's also a really weird bug in the game where if you scroll through your photo collection too quickly, the photos will disappear, but not actually close, and each click of the mouse will send you flying backwards through the facility. Scrolling through your photos by clicking and holding the mouse button and swiping also feels incredibly cumbersome, mostly due to the fact that scrolling is slow and constantly hitches and lags. These issues are fairly minor and easy to ignore, It's the big one I mentioned earlier that's sadly a deal breaker. Which is a great shame, because when I was able to get a rhythm going in Veritas, I was actually having a good time. There'd be moments where the movement wouldn't be too glitchy, or I wouldn't be inputting a series of commands or pushing a lot of buttons, and I'd forget why I was mad at the game for a spell. The puzzles are pretty fun, and some of them are really creative, but eventually I just couldn't handle constantly having to restart entering some code into a keypad, or going backwards instead of forwards, just because I was clicking the mouse a little too quickly. Hopefully this is something that's patched by Glitch Games, because there's a pretty enjoyable puzzle game here otherwise. Thanks very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, consider sticking around here at Words About Games. Our content includes review impressions of games big and small, a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing the happenings in and around the games industry, weekly opinion videos, reactions, debate-driven top 5 and top 10 lists, a regular Hall of Fame series where we discuss our favourite games, and indie game spotlights. We also stream every Friday and Saturday at twitch.tv/wordsaboutgames. Most importantly, have a brilliant day.